This is the Dollemore Daily, and I'm Jesse Dollemore. You know, since Donald Trump lost the election, well, even before he lost the election in 2020, in 2016, he was rambling and yammering about how everything was rigged and it's a rigged election. Mainly because if he lost, which everyone, including the Trump team, thought he would have a fallback conspiracy theory about why he lost, some kind of a justification. It has been proven time and time again that large-scale, widespread voter fraud does not happen. Certainly, it happens in isolated incidents across the country. For instance, there was a case in Connecticut recently with Democrats, which is pretty rare. When you think about all of the headlines that you've read, that you've seen, that you've talked about with your friends, it typically is a Republican endeavor, voter fraud. And here's a case of an elected official in Iowa whose wife has now been sentenced or found guilty, of 52 counts of voter fraud in her attempt to get her husband elected. This is from the Des Moines Register. Jurors find Iowa County Supervisor's wife guilty of 52 counts of voting fraud. The wife of a northwestern Iowa County Supervisor was convicted Tuesday of a scheme to stuff the ballot box in her husband's unsuccessful race for the Republican nomination to run for Congress in 2020. The Sioux City Journal reports that jurors deliberated 6 hours before finding Kim Taylor guilty of 26 counts of providing false information in registering and voting, 3 counts of fraudulent registration, and 23 counts of fraudulent voting. Prosecutors said Taylor, a Vietnam native, approached numerous voters of Vietnamese heritage with limited English comprehension and filled out and signed election forms and ballots on behalf of them and their English-speaking children. They said the scheme was designed to help her husband, Jeremy Taylor, a former Iowa House member who finished a distant third in the race for the Republican nomination to run for Iowa's 4th District congressional seat. Despite that loss, he ultimately won the election to the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors that fall. Jeremy Taylor, who met his wife while teaching in Vietnam, has not been charged but has been named as an unindicted co-conspirator. I should have maybe read that sentence as Republican, office seeker, one who wants to use democracy to gain power, yet thwart democracy to get power. Jeremy Taylor, that person who met his wife while teaching in Vietnam, has not been charged but has been named as an unindicted co-conspirator. The case remains under investigation. Assistant U.S. Attorney Ron Timmons, one of 3 prosecutors who presented the federal government's case, said he couldn't comment on any potential future indictments. Kim Taylor, who remains free pending sentencing, faces up to 5 years in prison on each charge. Now, before I get to this ludicrous statement from her attorney, I want to point out that this really is a Republican problem. These hypocrites, these liars, these fraudsters, these scamsters, these grifters, these charlatans, they want to gain power using democracy, but because their ideas don't line up generally with the electorate, they want to put their thumb on the scale and cheat democracy. They want to end democracy and still use democracy. They want to cloak themselves in a patina of democratic vote, yet they have no interest or adherence to the principles of actual democracy. Now listen to this statement from the lawyer about this woman who was just found guilty of many counts of voter fraud. Quote, "Now is a time for empathy for a family that is suffering," said her attorney, F. Montgomery Brown, adding his focus is to get the best outcome at sentencing. Do you think is now a time for empathy for this family that's gone through so much? Wonder who put them through that. Was it their criminality? their dedication to the prospect of ending democracy in possibly America at large, but certainly their local community in Iowa. Now, some of the details of the crime are here. Woodbury County elections officials became aware of possible voter fraud in September 2020 when 2 Iowa State University students from Sioux City requested absentee ballots only to learn ballots had already been cast in their name. Here's the other thing. This irritates me so much. This enrages me that these 2 students would have been disenfranchised if not for them advocating for themselves. We shouldn't have a system where unless you stand up and say something, you're just going to have your vote stolen from you and given to somebody else to cast. That's the system Republicans want. They were allowed to withdraw those ballots and cast their own, but Woodbury County Auditor Pat Gill, who also is election commissioner, kept the fraudulent ballots. When processing absentee ballots on election night, election workers notified Gill that the handwriting on a number of them appeared to be similar. Most voter fraud cases involve one voter casting a single ballot in another person's name, said Assistant U.S. Attorney Richard Evans, who helped prosecute Taylor's case. Despite what's in the media, voter fraud is extremely rare, Evans said. To have someone vote dozens of times for several people, that is rare. Yes, up until this point, it has been extremely rare. However, it seems to be picking up steam and with one side. It seems to be becoming more and more of a popular attempt from Republicans. Remember 2016 and all of the different convictions that took place after Donald Trump said, it's rigged, and created all kinds of security concerns for average American voters. I remember when I voted in 2016, and there were older people, Trump voters, when I lived in Orange County, California, who were convinced the fix was in, who wanted to make sure their vote, even though it ended up being they were just standing in the wrong line for the wrong precinct, they thought, oh no, this is it. This is what Trump's been talking about. And of course, that elevated in 2020 when he lost the election. And leading up to the election, he said, the only way that I will lose is that it was rigged. The only way. He creates the conspiracy theory and then feeds the people who are just stupid enough to believe it. These types of people, I don't know what her defense was, but very likely they were saying that, it was the only way to win because of the fact that all of the other fraud that's taking place, when they themselves are the only fraud that's taking place. Let me know what you think. I'd love to know. You can call, leave me a brief voicemail, 714-576-4054. Of course, you can email me daily@dollemore.com, or you can just leave a comment below and talk about it in the comment section. This is going to be more prevalent leading into 2024. I guarantee you Donald Trump will absolutely, it hasn't quite started yet, but mark my words and wait for it. Donald Trump is going to start ringing this bell, beating this drum about it being rigged, about the system and suitcases of ballots being unpacked and ballots being dumped into the river and all this other nonsense and lies like he did pre and post 2020. If you appreciate what I do and you want to help support my work, I would encourage you to do so. I would ask you to do so. Click the join button below. For $1.99, you can become a channel member here. You can go over to patreon.com/idatapodcast. You can hit the super thanks button. Just make sure you're subscribed, you like and comment, and you share this video with someone who needs to hear the information. I'll see you next time. Until I do, be genuine. Take care of one another.